Oh man, coming up next, the final single from the most hard-hitting, epic rock band in history, at least for my money and for many years too. For a decade, this band ripped a hole in the ozone layer and redefined what rock could be. But for their final magnum opus, they came out of left field with a dynamite single that was so catchy they knew it couldn't miss. Whereas they had few hits because they were an albums band first, and they only released a handful of singles, they knew they had a surefire hit on their hands, and it came through their final proper studio album. Would the band, who only had a few top 40 singles because mainstream radio refused to play them, finally get their number one hit? Well, we're going to find out. This song had the best chance yet, but it was a big gamble for this band. It sounded nothing like their heavy sound. And regardless, though, the band would defy radio through their career and sell 300 million records. But this one is a banger. Let's get into it. Hey, music junkies, Professor of Rock, always here to celebrate the greatest artists and the greatest songs of all time. So it's time for another edition of our series, Career Suicide. Man, we haven't done one of these in a long time. This is a show where we break down an artist, song, or an album that took a massive risk. And maybe the gamble paid off, or maybe it didn't. Maybe it was a complete train wreck. In this show, it could go either way. But whatever the outcome, it's a guaranteed great story. For today's installment, we're coming back to the Lords of Rock. You know who I'm talking about. We talk about them a lot on this channel. Robert Plant, Jimmy Page, John Paul Jones, and John Bonham, the mighty Led Zeppelin. A song that definitely went in a risky new direction. As a matter of fact, the whole album was quite a risk, viewed by some as an ill-fated overhaul of Zeppelin's roots, by others as the next step in this epic band's evolution. I'm talking about Fool in the Rain from 1979 to In Through the Outdoor. So let's set it up. By 1977, Led Zeppelin had released 7 multi-platinum studio albums, 5 of which topped the charts in America, went all the way to number 1. Having created some of the hardest-hitting tracks of the late 60s and the 70s, Zeppelin had already secured their legacy as rock's most formidable band. That was never in doubt. Leading up into 1976's presence and afterwards, the band really went through the ringer, big time. For example, Robert Plant, while on holiday in Rhodes, Greece, with his family, sustained multiple injuries in a horrible car accident. Robert came away with a broken ankle and elbow. It left him in a wheelchair for quite some time. Plant's injuries brought the rock juggernaut's touring plans to a halt for the time. The band wouldn't schedule another one until February of 77, when they intended to kick off their 11th North American tour started in Texas. It's going to be a record-breaking time for the band, covering 30 cities and pulling in an audience of 1 million plus. However, a few days before the start of the tour, Robert Plant came down with tonsillitis, leaving him without his voice. The tour was then rescheduled to kick off on April 1st in Dallas and close out on July 24th in Oakland, California. Later, extra dates were added to extend the tour to August 13th. And with Robert Plant fully recovered, Zeppelin was back and ready to storm America. That is, at least until they weren't. On July 26th, just as Zeppelin was beginning that extended portion of the tour, news reached Robert Plant that his 6-year-old son, Carrick, had died of a viral infection. In shock, Plant caught the first plane back to England, where a funeral for Carrick took place a few days later. Once again, everything came to a halt. The remaining dates were canceled, and with Robert Plant in shambles, rumors began to circulate about the band's impending breakup. Of course, he wrote All My Love for Carrick. For a while there, things were in big doubt. Led Zeppelin remained largely inactive for more than a year. However, by late 1978, with sufficient time to heal and regroup the band, they flew to Stockholm, Sweden to record a new album. There at ABBA's Polar Recording Complex, they got to work on In Through the Outdoor. You know, the close of the 70s, it was an odd time for mainstream music, a cool time. You have the last gasps of disco happening, the rise of soft rock, now known as yacht rock, and punk morphing into post-punk and new wave, A lot of things going on. What a time. I mean, there was a strange and eclectic mixture of songs on the airwaves for sure. Meanwhile, established 70s rock outfits were fighting accusations of becoming dinosaurs, extinct and irrelevant. On both sides of the Atlantic, the punk movement had, with all its energy and anarchy, sought to cast the 70s rockers in a light of utter contempt. For example, Sex Pistols' Johnny Rotten wore a t-shirt reading, "I hate Pink Floyd." Members of The Clash claimed that just seeing a Led Zeppelin album was enough to make them want to hurl. However, for Led Zeppelin, that antagonistic feeling, it wasn't mutual. In fact, Page said that he really enjoyed punk music, even called the Sex Pistols superb. Thing is, in the midst of this mainstream music change, whether they like it or not, In Through the Outdoor, it was going to be a statement album. But what would it say? Was Led Zeppelin now a tired act? Clearly, years of trauma had really slowed their enthusiasm. Or was Zeppelin still able to dominate public taste? In Through the Outdoor would be the test, ultimately. It would also be a very big risk. Once again, Jimmy Page was credited as the sole producer of the album. Nothing out of the ordinary here. But what was out of the ordinary was how little material he actually brought to the table. For the first time ever, it was John Paul Jones who was driving this record. Why don't you show up and make it all right? Composing or co-composing all but one of the album's tracks. Page's empty-handed approach was due, at least in part, to his wrestle with heroin addiction. John Bonham, too, was struggling with substance abuse. Alcohol was just consuming him. Each would arrive late to the sessions and seemed to lack the energy to keep up with their counterparts. They were struggling. This left John Paul Jones and Robert Plant to lead the way on In Through the Outdoor. But with Jonesy at the helm of the album, it would take a risky sonic departure from previous Zeppelin offerings. Like I said, keyboards at the forefront, synth all over the record. In fact, John Paul Jones was so enamored with his new state-of-the-art keyboard, a Yamaha GX1 synthesizer, he even named it the Dream Machine. Said Page about it. John Paul Jones had been inspired by this keyboard. He had complete numbers that he'd written, with verses, chorus, middles, and it was fantastic because Presence had been an electric guitar album. John Paul Jones, he had this writing renaissance because he hadn't written whole numbers before, and suddenly he had. And Jones, in his own words, would say, and I quote, Robert and I ended up at the studio with nobody else there. We had to kind of more or less write the album before anybody else arrived. End of quote. When completed, In Through the Outdoor would boast 7 songs, all quite sophisticated and well-arranged, I must say. Headlining the record, its only single, actually, Fool in the Rain. So Fool in the Rain has the distinction of being the most Latin-influenced song that Led Zeppelin ever wrote. There's a reason for that. Its origins more or less came about during the 1978 FIFA World Cup hosted by Argentina. This was before gathering in the studio in Sweden. The band had recently got back together to write, rehearse, and to figure out what it was like to be a band again, Led Zeppelin again. And naturally, when they weren't writing music, they were watching the World Cup, which took place between, I believe it was June 1st to June 25th. And as a side note, it's actually been called the dirtiest World Cup of all time. Important to this story, though, the band members were absolutely taken with the samba beats that they heard playing throughout the tournament. So they wanted to build a song around them. Said Page about it. On Fool in the Rain, John Paul Jones had the opportunity to play those keyboards, and I was able to play a number of acoustic guitars and an intense electric solo that came after the samba-like section. A samba, yes, with plenty of percussion overdubs. End of quote. Speaking of percussion, John Bonham, the legend, who is often boxed in as a hard rock drummer, proves that he is truly a jack of all trades and jack of all genres, really, on this track. Totally in his element. The man is completely at ease with swing and samba. His drumming was a take on the famous Purdy Shuffle, created by funk drummer Bernard Purdy. I mean, if In Through the Outdoor wasn't already a risk with its heavy use of keyboards, you'd think that Fool in the Rain was guaranteed career suicide employing samba. This was overall the band that rocked, particularly with Jones's whistle-led breakdown nearly 2.5 minutes into the track. Love it. So regarding the lyrics, Robert Plant tells the story of a burning love affair that has become a terrible mess. As this fool in the rain stands on the street corner, waiting for his love, he watches people go shuffling downtown. But his woman with the light in her eye, she isn't anywhere to be found. As time ticks away, the storm he thought would blow over just clouds the light of love he had found. Now sopping wet, the final verse closes with a bit of a twist. We learn that all along he's been waiting on the wrong block. It's a song like Sliding Doors, Missed Connections, very cool. Zeppelin seems to have really believed in this track. Reportedly, they thought it would be one of their biggest hits, if not their biggest hit. They thought it was so catchy it would go down on radio. So they chose it as the lead and only single for In Through the Outdoor. But would the gamble backfire? Of course, they didn't know it at the time, but Fool in the Rain would be Zeppelin's final single, released while John Bonham was actually still alive, giving it a unique place in the band's catalog for sure. Even the act of releasing a single for Led Zeppelin was something of a rare occurrence. I mean, between 1969 and 1979, the band dropped just 10 45 RPM records in North America. There's Good Times, Bad Times, Whole Lotta Love, Immigrant Song, Black Dog, Rock and Roll, Over the Hills and Far Away, Jamaica, Trampled Underfoot, Candy Store Rock, and Fool in the Rain. Things were even more sparse over in the UK, where they only issued the promotional single of Trampled Underfoot. I mean, the band, they were stingy with singles, well, actually for a few reasons. For one, Peter Grant chose to market the band primarily through touring, especially early on. It was a relentless pursuit to build up the fan base. But like I mentioned earlier, Zeppelin was on their 11th U.S. tour by 77. That's 11 U.S. tours in less than a decade. Not to mention everywhere else in the world. I mean, these guys were touring fools. Grant also sealed a deal with Led Zeppelin's label Atlantic, giving the band veto power over any proposed singles. Now, this was a critical step in helping them preserve their artistic integrity. It meant that there was less pressure to write shorter tracks or to cut longer tracks down to size for radio airplay. They weren't trying to get the hit single, although it didn't stop the band from trimming Fool in the Rain from 6 minutes and 8 seconds down to 4 minutes and 50 seconds. Plus, albums were more profitable than singles, said Page about it in a quote. We didn't have to create songs for a pop singles market. I mean, that would have been a kiss of death for us. By not releasing a traditional single, we forced people to buy albums, which is what we wanted. We wanted them to see the band's complete vision. I mean, if you think about that statement right there, this band knew exactly what they were doing. That's why all their albums were multi-platinum and a few of them the biggest selling ever. They focused people on their albums. So with Led Zeppelin anticipating rare commercial hit status for Fool in the Rain, how did it go? Well, probably not as well as they had expected, but it was enough. Fool in the Rain came in at number 21 on the Billboard Hot 100, came in at number 31 on the US Cashbox chart. It was actually in Canada where it shined the brightest. It almost broke the top 10. It reached number 12 there. Still, as far as Zeppelin singles go, is one of the more successful tracks. Their highest, of course, A Whole Lotta Love. That came in at number 4 about a decade earlier. Following that, you had Black Dog at number 15, Immigrant Song at number 16, Jamaica at number 20, and then Fool in the Rain at number 21. But actually, when you think about it, for being such a departure from audience expectations, it did really well. But the band did feel it would be their biggest hit. And why wouldn't they? This song is so catchy. I'm shocked it was not a top 10 hit. Should have been top 10 at least. On another note, Fool in the Rain was actually never performed live in concert. For one, the band didn't have much time to do it, as In Through the Outdoor dropped on August 22nd, 1979. John Bonham would die a year later on September 25th, 1980. And in between that span, Zeppelin only played one tour. Later years, though, Robert Plant would play it live a couple of times. He did it once in '93 and then again in a surprise duet with Pearl Jam at Chicago's House of Blues in 2005. Several other bands have taken on the song as well, including Dave Matthews Band, Blues Traveler, Vanilla Fudge, OAR, Edie Brickell and the New Bohemians, and Billy Joel has a cool version. Now, although Fool in the Rain wouldn't be a smash hit, it did heavily influence a major hit song for another big-time band, Rosanna by Toto. In fact, in my interview with Steve Lukather and David Page, they admitted as much.
We heard him playing the song, and then Jeff goes, well, Jeff had been listening to Led Zeppelin, Fool on the Hill. That and Bernard Purdy's Babylon System.
Yeah.
So he sort of did his version of that.
Also, Jeff Porcaro broke down the song's percussion on YouTube, where he admits he stole the beat from two other records.
Another is the John Bonham on Fool in the Rain, as Led Zeppelin tune.
Released as a single on March 1982, Rosanna went on to grab the #2 spot of the Billboard Hot 100. So in a way, you could say that Fool in the Rain was a huge hit, going all the way to #2. I mean, a big influence on that one. Anyway. So was In Through the Outdoor a career suicide for the band? Well, let's look at how it did. Let's consider its place in the band's legacy. So released on August 15, 1979, In Through the Outdoor garnered a mixed reception. Some Zeppelin fans were horrified when they dropped the needle on the record. They complained that there was little in the way of hard rock. But this wasn't the first time that Zeppelin had been accused of being too soft. They faced similar criticisms on their third album, and for some, Houses of the Holy was a letdown after their hard-hitting fourth record. Not for me, though. I loved it. I loved every change, everything they did. And that's always the case. You can't please everybody. Never gonna happen. But, the Zeppelin fandom, they cast their votes in favor of the new album at the cash register and on the request line for sure. In Through the Outdoor raced to #1 in both the UK and on the American charts, like almost every other Zeppelin album before it. Stateside, the album sold 5 million copies in just a matter of months and has since been certified, I believe it's almost 7 times platinum. In Through the Outdoor also climbed to #1 in Canada and New Zealand. It went to #2 in Japan, #3 in Australia, #5 in Spain, and #7 in France. And not bad for keyboards and samba, nothing was slowing down this record. And the members of Zeppelin wouldn't be falling on their swords anytime soon. Okay, so for a minute here, let's consider an alternate universe scenario. Answer me this question. What if John Bonham hadn't died on that tragic day in September of 1980? What if Led Zeppelin had lived on to create more albums? What do you think a post In Through the Outdoor record would have sounded like for this band? Was Fool in the Rain the future of Zeppelin? Would they have adopted more synth and incorporated new wave elements into their music with, the times being what they were? Obviously, there's no way to know for sure. It's all speculative. But that being said, we do have some hints. One came from Jimmy Page, who revealed that he and John Bonham had actually talked about what Zeppelin's next album would sound like. Both felt In Through the Outdoor was too keyboard-centric, too soft. They wanted to return to a heavier, hard driving rock sound. Said Page about it, and I quote, Bonham loved playing this sort of stuff. So we definitely would have done some guitar-driven riff things because he loved all that and because we'd just done a keyboard album. It's not a lot to go on, but it sounds like Jimmy Page thought In Through the Outdoor was rather a detour than a new direction. So what do you think about this album? Was it an aberration or a harbinger of things to come? Let us know in the comments. I'd love to hear from you about that. This is arguably the catchiest Led Zeppelin song that they ever recorded. I remember being just mesmerized by it as a kid when my dad played it, in his shop while we were working or on the family turntable. To me, it shows Zeppelin's diversity and their creativity. I really do believe that if they had wanted to, they could have had a bunch of #1 hits. But they weren't focused on commercialism. They were focused on their own artistic vision. And in the end, they outsold just about everybody in the history of rock anyway. Hey, thanks so much for watching. Leave us a comment about Led Zeppelin and Fool in the Rain. What are your memories of this song? What do you think about it? What do you think about In Through the Outdoor compared to other albums? What do you think the future of Led Zeppelin would have sounded like had things been different? Let us know below. If you like our content, we invite you to subscribe below. We'd love to have you as part of our community. Until next time, 3 chords and the truth, my friends.